medication. So laced and lethal fentanyl is in our community, so we need to talk about it. Tonight, we're going to, let me just go over a few housekeeping pieces first. So this is obviously a Zoom webinar, so you won't see yourself. And if you have any questions, we'd like you to go ahead and email them to Liz Thiever, our wellness coordinator out at the Tahoma School District. And she'll pop her email in the chat for you. And then at the end, after the presentation, if we have time, we'll go ahead and try to answer some of those questions. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Brad Finegood. He comes to us as the strategic advisor for public health from Seattle, King County on all things behavioral health related. He'll be giving the majority of the presentation. And then we also are joined by GR Harryford, a local parent who has been impacted by this crisis. So Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hey, everybody. My name is Brad Finegood. As Stephanie said, I work for Public Health, Seattle, King County. My job is to be responsible for overdose prevention for the county, to monitor drugs, drug trends, what's going on in our community, and to keep an eye out for you, community at large, the public, our youth, our community members, and to make sure that folks are safe. Really is a huge honor to be in front of you today. When Stephanie reached out a couple of weeks ago, this was an issue that was already bubbling to the surface. I had the honor of getting to talk to GR, who you'll hear from in a little bit, just shortly before this. I am an East County resident also, in addition to working for public health. So this is an issue that is permeating our community. One of the things that I'll say that I really appreciate and really love is the knowledge that and the understanding that we need to do something, that we need to educate ourselves about what's going on, because being naive to an issue is not going to help us deal with an issue. And so what my goal today is to equip folks with some tools that they can use so that they can better understand what's going on as far as overdoses in our community and the rise of fentanyl that's permeated not only our community here in East County, but all over King County, not only all over King County, but through Washington State, the West Coast, and is really spreading nationwide. So this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. In addition to working in this field for the past 20 to 25 years, I lost a brother to a drug overdose when I was younger. And so what we're here to talk about today is how to equip you so you don't go through the same thing that my family went through. Because when you get that phone call, when my parents got that phone call that my brother had passed away, the whole world stops and changes, right? And so what we'll talk about today is how we can prevent that from happening. And we're going to be able to prevent it from happening by taking the right steps. Because if that happens, then there's no tomorrow. But as long as that doesn't happen, there's always tomorrow. And we can lead with love, and we can love our loved ones in our community and make it just that much of a better, safer place. So I'm super excited to be with you all here today. This is not only what I do for work, as I said, but it's something I feel very connected to and very passionate about. So I'm going to turn it over to somebody who I'm going to call at this point a friend, because we've touched base many of times and connected on many different levels. GR, who's a community member in Maple Valley, and somebody who I admire because it's somebody who's stepped up to the plate and said, you know, this is happening in our community, this is happening in our place, and we need to do something about it. So it's so important to hear from the voice of our community members and our loved ones. I will pass it over to GR. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And yeah, on 12/20, our son Chase was found unresponsive at his girlfriend's house, and we received not the same call that you were talking about, Brad, but something that was very scary, and that was, get over here, your son's unresponsive. And it was about 5 or 7 minutes away. We got in our car driving over there. By the time we got there, it looked like, I don't know, it looked like a house had burnt down. There was ambulances and fire trucks and lots of cop cars. And I stood out in front of that house. My wife pushed her way upstairs. If you know my wife, Michelle, you know, she's a feisty one, but she wasn't going to be held back. And I guess our son had taken a pill that was laced with fentanyl. And talk about naive. We were pretty naive about this whole thing. And so as I stood outside that house it might have been 10 or 15 minutes, but it felt like forever. I knew that the next thing the cops were going to do is they were going to come out and tell me either A, I'm sorry, we couldn't get him back, or B, we got him back and here's what's going to happen. And all I could think about in that days was, you know, what am I going to do with my wife? What's our life going to be like after this? I guess his whole body was gray and his lips were blue. And I didn't see him like that. Thank God I don't have that memory, but that was the worst moment of my life, honestly. And luckily they came out and said they got him back, and they took him to Covington, to the hospital there. And that began a nightmare for us. It was an awakening too, though. And again, the hospital did a great job, but we left that hospital a couple hours later, no help, no assistance. Woke up the next morning, two parents looking at each other. We've been married for almost 10 years. This is our youngest. We've raised 3 boys, and we're just in this world that we don't know what to do. We don't know where to go. We took 2 days off work trying to find inpatient, outpatient, anything for him. And we got him finally into some inpatient treatment, but that was where my kind of drafting into this whole situation started. And it was an awakening. And so that was a couple of days later, I reached out to you, Brad, and said, man, we got to do something about getting awareness out for fentanyl. And you were super nice to me that day, because I was still, 2 days after my son was dead on the floor, very emotional. And I'm still very emotional. I feel like every day he's still at risk. He just came back from 30 days at treatment. But man, it's as I've learned, it's going to be a long, long road. And we're at the beginning of the beginning, not even at the end of the beginning. So I guess I'll shut up there, but I do appreciate the new friendship that you and I have. And it keeps me a little more sane right now. So thank you for allowing me to tell my story.
Thank you. Before you go, real quick, and I know we didn't have like a planned question and answer, and I'm going to jump into my presentation in a second, but I just do have one question for you, for the folks who are kind enough to be joining us tonight. So going back to before Chase was found, and before that evening happened where you all received that phone call and came up onto the house, what would you as a parent now, what would you have told yourself as a parent then?
Well, and I don't know if I understand your question correctly. There were some signs that I would look for. He was going to sleep really early. COVID's been crazy. So the kids have been in their rooms and they've been playing Xbox for hours. But we'd go up there sometimes and he'd be asleep really early in his room, and he'd sleep all night. He seemed to lose interest in doing certain things. Just there were probably some signs that we could have watched out for. We knew he had been taking some stuff called triple C, that the kids call it. We knew he had done some marijuana. We didn't know about this whole fentanyl thing. Certainly we have never been through this with our 2 other boys. So did I answer your question there?
Yeah, I mean, it's, one of those questions, like knowing now what you know. I probably didn't ask the question right. Sorry.
I got one. This is a good one. Narcan, right? The only reason my son's alive today is because a series of events had to happen. He actually did that at his girlfriend's house. Well, thank God for his girlfriend's mom, because she knew how to do rescue breathing, which I had never heard of before, but it's kind of a varied CPR. You could probably tell more about that. So she did rescue breathing until the police came, and the police had Narcan. And thank God for our mayor, because he made sure every single one of our cops has Narcan on them at all times. And that's not the case in every city. Because after I called you, Brad, I called Sean, right? So I called our mayor and I was making the rounds. And he said, yeah, every cop has Narcan. Well, the Narcan wasn't enough for the police, and the EMTs had to give him some of their Narcan too. So a couple of things that we've done in my house is that we absolutely have Narcan. And that's a big thing for me, is trying to make sure anyone who wants Narcan, I really believe everybody should have Narcan. It's not that you're planning on your kid to having an overdose like mine, but God forbid one of your kid's friends comes to the house and they end up dead in the bathroom like mine was, right? So rescue breathing, understanding that this fentanyl is everywhere, it's in everything. DJ, the chief of police, is my neighbor, and he and I sat down and had a cup of coffee, and it was a big awareness there too that this Narcan or this fentanyl is in everything. And so being prepared as a parent with Narcan, and then also understanding, learning how to do rescue breathing, and then just being aware of some of the signs.
That's great. Thank you. You know, and for me, and I think one of the things that we'll talk about in a moment is to you know, not ignore some of those signs and symptoms, because, you know, if we ignore them and think, you know, there's this huge thing that overlays substance use and people who are using, and you know, it can't happen to us and not in our family and stuff like that. And if we ignore those signs and symptoms, then when it does happen to us, because I know for myself, when my brother passed away, that was a huge thing, that, you know, I would just remember my parents, you know, crying afterwards that like, this can't happen in our family. There's no way that this would happen in our family. And if there were signs and symptoms, there were signs and symptoms that we ignored because we didn't want to believe them. But if you don't want to believe them, then the after effect can be awful. And so, you know, I just wanted to thank you for kicking us off tonight. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your parenting, and thank you for making that first call to me, and launching so much of this work in the community, because of your work, we'll be able to you know, educate folks, and hopefully this doesn't have to happen to somebody else and somebody other's family. So thank you so much.
I'm sorry you lost your brother. I'm looking forward to your presentation, and thank you for your work, because you wake up every day, put your boots on, and do this all the time. So I'm really thankful that King County has something like this and has someone like you doing this. So
thank you so much. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. So yeah, thank you, everybody. So again, my name is Brad Finegood. I'm gonna hope that you all can see my presentation. If not, I hope somebody will say something. But I've been with the county now for 7 years, leading our overdose response and our response to substance use disorder. And it really is an honor to get to do this work. It's hard. It's gut wrenching. When GR was talking and telling his story, I have to stop myself from coming to tears, just because knowing what it's like as a parent, as a sibling who's lost a loved one, and knowing what it's like in the community and how hard it is these days, especially in the days of COVID. I myself have three children who are all teenagers. And I'll talk about that a little bit, because as we've learned what's happened in the community, I've also been learning on this trajectory of learning as a parent. So I put this slide up because this slide was like a very sentinel event for me. So in October of 2019, we at the county got a phone call. And that phone call, in this case, came from the sheriff's office, that 2 teenagers had died at Skyline High School in Sammamish of fentanyl drug overdose. Shortly after that, we got another phone call that 2 other teenagers had died in North Seattle, in the Ballard area, of drug overdose. And for us, that took us by extreme surprise. We have not seen a spate of teenage drug overdoses like that in quite some time. My job, and I will go over the data and information shortly, but it's to monitor this and to keep track of this for the safety and the well-being of the community. So we had basically 4 suburban youth, teenagers, high schoolers die within like a 1-week period, all because of fentanyl overdose. And we had been monitoring this idea of fentanyl and fentanyl coming in our community, but we hadn't seen it rapidly inundating our community like it had in other communities. We had been monitoring it. It happened in the East Coast, and primarily on the East Coast. You know, we heard fentanyl mixed in other drugs. A lot of people who were more chronic, long-term drug users who used harder drugs were dying of fentanyl because it was mixed in their drugs. But we started to see it in these in different forms that were coming into the community, and it was really scary. So what we're going to talk about today, and what I'd like for you to be able to take away from tonight, is three things. It's the community members, right? The first thing I want you to be able to take away is knowledge, right? The first part of what we're going to talk about is knowing and understanding a lot about what GR talked about and learned from, what I've learned from the hard way, what so many people have learned the hard way. What I'd like is for us all to learn about it and to educate together in not such the hard way being spending a Tuesday evening talking about it rather than having to experience what GR and his family went through with his son going through, luckily, thankfully, a non-fatal drug overdose. The second takeaway item that I want us to take away from tonight is about communication, right? And not about communication between me and you, although I will give you my information and you're more than willing to please get a hold of me at any time you want, but about communicating with our youth. Our conversation tonight is really about talking with teenagers and talking with our community about fentanyl. And so how to have that communication. My goal is to be able to give you some tools on how to communicate. And the third thing I want you to be able to take away with tonight is about preparation, right? God forbid you should have to go through what so many families have had to go through about coming across their loved one that has some type of drug overdose or some other types of issue. But I would much rather you be prepared and be able to deal with the situation than not be prepared and not be able to deal with the situation and something bad happened. Because one of the things that's true, and then I'll talk to you tonight, is these fentanyl pills are everywhere. I mean, everywhere across our community. And the way that they're coming into our community is super scary, and it impacts our youth. And I'll tell you why. But Maple Valley, like so many other small communities, are not immune to it and are going through it. As Stephanie said when she opened us up, it's here. So we better know about it and be able and know what we need to do about it. Also, as we go through, feel free to be able to send questions or thoughts through the chat to however you can do it. I'm not quite sure how you can do it through to the co-host. Feel free to email Liz, and I want to make sure that this conversation tonight is about being able to answer your questions within the community. So let's talk about knowledge. What is the knowledge? So fentanyl is a super duper powerful synthetic opioid. It's so powerful and so overwhelming of an opioid. It's about 50 to 100 times more powerful than heroin. So it's an extremely powerful opioid. Opioids, if you want to go back a step, opioids are a powerful narcotic analgesic, right? So it's a painkiller, right? Opioids are a painkiller. So Percocet, Oxycontin, Vicodin, these are all opioids that you might get from a doctor to deal with pain, right? So we started to see these come into the community in counterfeit pills. So these are not the same pills that you would get from a doctor or a hospital, but these are but they look very much the same. So you could see that there's two pills on the right here. One of them is counterfeit and one of them is not counterfeit. They're done so well that to the naked eye, you cannot tell the difference between a legitimate Percocet pill and a fake Percocet pill. Now, an M30 stands for Mallinckrodt 30. So if you go to a doctor and he gives you a prescription for Percocet, this is it's very possible that you would get this generic M30 pill. And it's totally legit, right? And a doctor might prescribe it to you for pain. The potential for overdose is super low if you take one or two. Maybe down the line, you're going to develop some type of opioid habit, like 10% of people do, but the lethality risk is super low. So what we started to see is these pills that were counterfeit coming into our community. They primarily, the precursors for the fentanyl are made in China, sent to Mexico, and then they're sent up the I-5 corridor, and they're coming in boatloads. Somebody just sent a note that they're called perks, right? They're called blues, they're called perks, right? They're called 30s, they're called M's, right? These are all what they're called on the street, and they're everywhere. So if you get it from a doctor or pharmacy, then they're going to be legit. If you buy it from somewhere else, from somebody who even says that they may have gotten it from a doctor or pharmacy, it's 98% chance that they're going to be counterfeit, have fentanyl, and have a super duper high lethality risk. Why is this important? So 2 reasons, right? We in community tend to trust things that come in a pill, right? So, we've trusted doctors forever. And so we trust it when our doctor gives us a prescription, and, for the most part, to be trusted, right? But when it comes in a way in which, when it comes in that form, it just adds to that trust. But these are very different. Again, these are counterfeit, and what's inside of them is acetaminophen, aspirin, and fentanyl, the super duper powerful opioid. Additionally, people feel like there's a decreased risk because they come in a pill, right? So youth, teenagers have a higher potential for experimentation, all that type of stuff. I remember many years ago when I was young, it was totally normal for people to take one of these types of pills for recreation, right? I remember MTV skits about how there was pill jars fill on kitchen tables at parties, and people would just take a handful because lethality risk was low, right? People trusted it because it was a pharmaceutical, right? People also trust it because if they swallow it, or many people smoke these pills, that they think there's a lower risk of overdose because they're not injecting something, and that is not true. We're seeing across the board that people are either swallowing the pill or smoking the pill and overdosing at tremendous amounts. And they're extremely, extremely available throughout the community. How much is in our community? I grabbed this off the news last year. So it's a little bit outdated, but it sort of shows you a little bit about the growth of these pills within our community. So in 2019, this was Homeland Security in the whole Pacific Northwest. Just a couple of years ago in 2019, seized 4 pounds of these pills, right? Seizures are not the best proxy for how much is in our community, but it's one way to tell because it's what's been confiscated. Now, with that, there's a tremendous amount that gets through Homeland Security and DEA and the local police, and it's everywhere. But in 2019, it just goes to show you there are 4 pounds seized. The next year in 2020, it was over tenfold that, and 50 pounds were seized of pills just a year and a half ago. Last year, there was 131 pounds seized in the first quarter of 2021. So these pills went from being a novelty and being unknown in our community to really being ubiquitous and being everywhere. Somebody put in the chat a message that that often people will give them away for free because they're so easy and they're so cheap, or like even as cheap as $5. So they're super easy to get, they're everywhere, and it's super duper cheap. I was talking to a family not too long ago, and they said, why would the dealers or the makers of these pills put fentanyl in it and want to kill people? Well, the truth of the matter is that fentanyl is an extremely, extremely addictive opiate. And so the rate of profit that is to be made off of these pills is tremendous. What's happened is within the Mexican cartels and the way that drugs have been produced and shipped is that it's easier and cheaper to make it because it's all chemicals. There's no agriculture needed. So what we've actually seen in our community is a super duper decrease in like heroin and a super duper increase in fentanyl and methamphetamine because it's easy to make, it doesn't smell, and they can be packaged in these little tiny pills and sent north. It's a huge increase. So what have we seen? How is this translated here into our community? Well, it's translated into immense carnage and death. In addition to all of the non-fatal overdoses that we have in the community, there are so many people that have died, right? So in 2015, which was, I came to the community in 2014, 2015 from Southwest Washington, from the Vancouver area. And when I came to this community, fentanyl was barely on our landscape. In 2015, so that's just like 6 years ago, 6+ years ago, there were only 3 fentanyl overdose deaths in our whole county. So fentanyl was barely on the landscape. We were really working on heroin-related overdose deaths. We're working on prescription drug-related overdose deaths. And then what we started to see, I would say sort of slowly at first, but it's taken off over the past couple of years, is a drastic increase in fentanyl-related overdose deaths. In 2016, that number went from 3 to 23. From 2016 to 2017, it went to 33. And then it started to double. So when we talk about exponential growth, an exponential growth curve, right? We started to see doubling. So 2017 to 2018, there were 66 people died. And then that number just kept doubling and doubling. In 2020, we had approximately 170 people die. So what we also saw on top of it was this pandemic, right? Where GR was talking about how youth were staying in their room, feeling isolated, trouble connecting at school, all the stuff that Liz works on into home school district all the time with wellness. So we started to see all of these societal factors sort of piling on top of each other: depression, anxiety, kids having trouble with, how are they connecting with other people, all that type of stuff. And at the same time, this overlay of this extremely lethal drug that most of us as adults had no idea about. But I'm going to tell you that kids knew about it. A lot of kids knew about it. And so we've gone from, in 2015, we had 3 people die of fentanyl overdose. Last year in King County, we had 382 people die of fentanyl-related overdose. Fentanyl now is attributed to over half of our overdose deaths in the county. If you ever want any of this information, we all make all of this information publicly available. It's available with a ton of other information at kingcounty.gov/overdose. And then you go down to our data dashboards, and it's in our data dashboards. Almost all of the information I'm going to give you today is available on this website, kingcounty.gov/overdose. So the other thing we saw with fentanyl is we saw a huge changing trend about where people were dying. So the map on the left is all drug overdoses since 2020. Every single one of those dots is a drug overdose. You see some clusters, right? Where do you see your clusters? In downtown Seattle, you see a lot of people dying of drug overdose. There's a lot of heroin overdose. There's a lot of methamphetamine overdose. You see it in other parts of South County, especially up and down the I-5 corridor. Now, if you take away, I like the visual that presents in Zoom. If you take away the light orange dots, which are all non-fentanyl related overdoses, and you just leave fentanyl related overdoses, it looks very, very different. It looks very scattershot across the county, right? So it looks very, it looks like it doesn't discriminate. It looks like it doesn't have favorites as far as like urban, suburban, rural. It looks like it's community wide. Why? I'm going to go back for a second. Is because these pills are able to permeate the community in a way that decreases risk perception, and it decreases the threshold to starting to use, right? It used to be that like the hard drugs, heroin, methamphetamine, ones that had a lot of stigma to them, that took a while for people to progress to. Now people that like blockade of I need to use a needle, I need to smoke a drug, all that type of stuff wasn't there anymore, right? So we went right to a drug that people trusted to feel experimental, and all of a sudden people were dying everywhere. In addition to overdosing and not dying, which is what we want to make sure that people understand. So another huge trend of fentanyl-related overdoses is that the people who were dying were much, much younger, right? The people who are using fentanyl are using it and dying at a super duper young age. They're not living to see opportunities to recover often, right? So when fentanyl is involved in a drug overdose, 75% of those people are under the age of 40. If you take fentanyl out of it, most of the people who are dying of drug overdose are much older. This is the one that gets me, right? This is, and all of my information that I have is updated as of like this morning or yesterday or something like that. But if you look, right, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but between 2018 and 2019, right, we were averaging 4 to 5 teenage-related overdoses a year. So before 2019, it was rare. I mean, we only saw more than 5 overdoses in a year twice in the 10 years preceding it. Once it was 6, once it was 7, but really 4 to 5 is what we would expect. And then all of a sudden in 2019, we started to see teenagers dying of fentanyl-related overdose. 2019, we saw 13, 4 of which I told you about earlier. And then we started to see these numbers of 23, 22 people who are teenagers, who are our community members, our high schoolers dying. And we've seen middle schoolers dying of fentanyl-related overdose from taking these pills. So why do people use fentanyl? Young people, they're available online through social media. So where are kids getting them? They're getting them from their friends. They trust their friends, but it's also very much available via social media. Big one is Snapchat, right? Snapchat, because people can put their information out there and then it's gone in 10 seconds or whatever it is. I don't have Snapchat, but it's there, right? And also young people they trust their source. They trust their friends. When their friends say, no, it's legit, they're going to trust their source, right? The risk perception is off because they believe their friends, right? Sometimes after a while, also youth start to become addicted to fentanyl. So physical dependence start to occur more quickly because fentanyl is such a more powerful opioid. It's a more powerful and it's shorter acting, so people have to take it more and more often in order to keep that level of a high. So how do people get it? From their friends, from people, from street dealers, and from social media. I will tell you this, one of our first learning experiences from public health was we did a little Instagram campaign to let people know on our public health channel about fentanyl and blue pills. One of the comments on Instagram was, yeah, blues are a thing, perks are a thing, but if you want some, hit me up, I can get you some, right? So even out in broad daylight, people were putting out that they can get it. Somebody also put that there's another app, Telegram, that's another big way to get it. So the use of social media, the use of electronic information, WhatsApp, all these types of ways where people were exchanging information as confidential as they can, it makes it pretty easy for people to get it. So what does this mean? It means that there's a lot of messaging that we need to be able to talk about, and that we'll talk about here in a second. Right? It means that the communication and the conversation needs to be vast, right? It means that people need to know about certain things like naloxone that we're going to talk about, or Narcan, about the Good Samaritan law. I'd love to say raise your hand if you know about the Good Samaritan law, but I can't see any of you. So I'm just going to tell you about the Good Samaritan law real quick. And the Good Samaritan law is a law that if it was in place would have saved my brother, because the person who was with him that day was afraid of getting in trouble if they called the cops if there was a problem. So the Good Samaritan law is a law that protects people from possession charges or use charges if they call 911 to try to get somebody help who's in distress. Right? So we need to know and educate our youth and our kids. I've done this at home and talked to my kids. GR was talking about it, like if it's it may be one of his kids, but it may be one of his kids' friends. And if you're on scene and if something's happening, that it's much more important to save somebody's life than it is to be afraid of getting in trouble. So we talked about educate yourself and knowledge. We're going to talk about communicating, right? And so the communication tools that are important. So one of the things that King County has done is we've invested in a campaign called Laced and Lethal. And there's a whole website, lacedandlethal.com. And lacedandlethal.com is a website that we've went out with to try to educate the community and really youth and young adults about the dangers of fentanyl. So we've leaned into it, and especially during this time of COVID, we've used social media to advertise and to let people know about the dangers that are coming with blue pills, right? With these fentanyl counterfeit pills. One of the things that I need to say real quick is that I'm talking a lot about these blue pills, these M30s, these perks. This is what we're seeing right now in our community. Next week it could be, and this is what it's been for the past couple of years. So we assume that this is what it's going to be, but it would be pretty easy for who's ever producing these pills to change what the pill press looks like and to change the color additive. And all of a sudden, we're going to talk about Z353 pills or Xanax bars or something of the sort. So it's extremely important for us to be able to stay connected to the most up-to-date information. And we at Public Health, that's what we're trying to do, is get that information out to the community. So we put out this website, lacedandlethal.com, and what it aims to do, and please, I hope you're going on it as we're talking so that you'll get the information and you'll have access to the information, but being able to understand what's going on, the drug trends, and also where to connect to resources, right? So when we went out with lacedandlethal.com, we did a ton of outreach with youth and qualitative research and interviews. And we found that youth are using for a couple of different reasons. They're using to cope with all of the anxieties and the struggles that they're having during COVID, during just being a teenager in today's day and age is very different than when I was a teenager many moons ago, I think 30 years ago now. My beard is looking forever gray in Zoom meetings. But with the struggles with social media, with having instant information and feedback and Instagram and Snapchat and who's looking at who and who's talking to who and who's talking about what. And as divisive as our world today, it's extremely anxiety provoking for a lot of our kids, as you all know. And so youth are using to look to cope as youth have always done. The problem is that what they're using is so much more lethal than what was out there 30 years ago. And kids are doing it because they're experimental and they're using it to get high for sensation seeking. We've known that that's always the case, right? I'm a firm believer in prevention and that we can do things like increase protective factors and decrease risk factors. And we can do as much community prevention as possible, but there's always going to be kids out there getting high, right? And we just have to be able to equip people with the right knowledge to limit the harms and to keep them from having really bad outcomes. Because if somebody dies, they never live to see tomorrow. But if we can keep people alive and keep people connected to services and get people the help, then there's always going to be tomorrow, and then we'll always be able to help people out. So we have, so we've made some videos. I was going to show a video, this video about, this one's called Meet Miles, and it's a King County specific video, and it's a story about how a friend lost a friend. Because we've heard that time and time again when we went out and talked to kids, is they all know people who are using fentanyl. They all know people who are using blue pills. And so how do youth help each other? That's the biggest thing that we've heard when we went out and talked to youth is how they want concrete, tangible tools that they can use to help and protect each other. This video is on our website if you want to go check it out. So our Laced and Lethal campaign, we spent a lot of money. Sorry, I was supposed to take out that money amount. This is the amount of money that we spent on social media. But we've gone out and through our Laced and Lethal campaign, and we've been seen over 11 million times by people in King County, educating people about the dangers of fentanyl. And people are engaging with the campaign. For those of you any of you who are in social media, advertising, all that type of stuff, this is pretty impressive, impressive stats that 300,000 people engaged with the campaign in some way. Right? People were watching the videos, people were wanting to understand, people were commenting, sending it on to their friends. People want to be able to know. One of the other things that we did was we came up with this partner toolkit, because in addition to going out with a social media campaign, we wanted to be able to equip you all with tools. So if you go to lacedandlethal.com and you scroll down to the very bottom of the first page, you'll see a Laced and Lethal partner toolkit. And there's everything in there. That is our gift to you in the community to help you carry that message on. So whether that is something that you want to put in on social media, whether that's something you want to hang in the school as far as a poster goes, whether that's something you just want to talk to your kids and educate about, we wanted to make sure to be able to equip the community with a partner toolkit. This is one of the biggest things I wanted to talk to you about today, is how to talk to your teenagers about fentanyl. So there's this whole talking to teenagers about fentanyl, how to communicate. I'm going to share, so when those teenagers that died in Ballard and in North Seattle, when that first came out about fentanyl, I was just taken aback, right? We had seen this spotty throughout the community, but all of a sudden, like within a flip second, it hit hard. That year, my oldest child was a senior in high school at Issaquah. And I was like, I was so concerned and so worried, and I wanted to know. So I went to my oldest kid and I go, buddy, I'm like, can you tell me, like, do you know about this stuff? And he's like, oh, Dad, let me tell you. I thought me as like the professional, as like the drug person for the county, knew a lot about what was going on. You know what he did? He picked up his phone and he went on his Snapchat and he's like, let me show you, Dad. And he scrolled through and he scrolled through and he's like, look at this, look at this, look at this. I want you to know our kids know. So when we come at them and we say, oh my goodness, why didn't you tell me? Blah, blah, blah. It's just going to make them shut down. The goal of communicating with kids about what they know about substances, and I have 3 kids and I've had this conversation with all of them, and my youngest one's in middle school. We need to be able to make it a conversation, right? We need to say, hey, what is it that you know? Can you talk to me about what you know, right? Let them be the experts. Tell me. And then we can also talk about the reality. And trust me, one of the most ineffective prevention campaigns, and there are the 2 most ineffective prevention campaigns in the history of drug prevention, and trust me, I've been doing this for 30 years. The first one is Just Say No, of Nancy Reagan. Just say no, son. If someone asks you, just say no. Why? Because kids want to be accepted, right? And so it's like, how do I say no? What are my alternatives? What can I do? So talking through so many contingencies with our youth. The second most ineffective tool that we've seen in the history of substance use prevention is the scared straight, right? So you remember back, hopefully, I mean, again, I don't know if I'm aging myself, but you know, when people went in and they're like, you're gonna die, you're gonna end up in prison, you're gonna end up with no teeth, blah, 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 blah. Because what happens is people will look around them and see that that's not happening to the people that they know. So we need to explain the reality, be really clear about the risk. This, how to talk to teens about fentanyl And all of the information is available in this toolkit and is available on the Laced and Lethal website. And the last thing that I'll say, so we've talked about equipping ourselves with knowledge. We've talked about communicating. And the last thing I'll say is we need to make sure that we're prepared and we're prepared at home. And this is what GR was talking about the things that I know now that I wish I knew then, right? Have Narcan, things like that, have Narcan at home. So if there's two things that I can tell you to be prepared with, it would be to know what an overdose looks like. I'll tell you that because I've talked to so many parents, and the first thing that they've told me is, oh my goodness, my son was sleeping and wouldn't wake up. And then I went and shook them and shook them and shook him, and he woke up, and I just let him go back to sleep. An overdose, an opioid overdose, so a fentanyl-related overdose, is respiratory depression. And it starts with going to sleep. You never, ever, 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 ever want to let somebody sleep off an overdose. That's what happened to my brother. He had a long night. He was with a friend. It was on New Year's. New Year's Eve. He woke up on New Year's Day. It was extremely difficult to be woken up. Can't be woken up. And he was snoring super duper loud, and he wasn't a snorer. So two huge signs that were right in this poster. You can't be woken up and snoring abnormally. The person he was with was like, wake up, Greg, wake up, wake up. And he couldn't wake up. So the person shook him, wake up, wake up. He finally woke up. She was like, let's go do this. He's like, no, I want to go back to sleep. She's like, okay, let's go take it. Let's take a nap. 3 hours later, he was dead. Couldn't be woken up. So know what the signs of overdose are and know what to do, right? Don't let somebody go back to sleep. The second thing that I would say is to have Narcan or naloxone on you. If I could step away from the Zoom, I would go down the hall and into my into my bathroom, and in my bathroom is a Narcan kit, right? It looks exactly like this third poster. So Narcan is an overdose antidote, right? It's super easy. In this Narcan, you just spray it up somebody's nose, and it brings it, and it's like kryptonite for Superman. If Superman was bad and kryptonite was good, right? I hope you get that. That, like, what it does is it reverses the powers of an overdose. The best thing about Narcan is if somebody is not in an overdose state, it does no harm to them. You don't want to lead with Narcan, right? You want to try to wake somebody up, make sure that they're doing okay, all that type of thing, right? But if you do end up getting to the point where you think that you need to use Narcan on somebody, right? If by some chance they're just drunk and won't woke up, Narcan won't work on them, but it's not going to cause them any harm. The other thing I'll say, always call 911, because you might find yourself in a situation just like GR said, where somebody's doing rescue breathing or uses a dose of Narcan, and there needs to be more behind, because one of the things we know is with the power of fentanyl, sometimes it's taking more Narcan kits. The other thing you'll see on this poster on the left-hand side is sometimes there's changes in skin intonation, depending on the pigmentation of people's skin, darker skin, lighter skin. Sometimes the skin will be cold and clammy, all that type of stuff. And we want to make sure that that if you ever have any questions, call 911, right? And if something happens, please do not be afraid, because they are there to help you, right? There's laws that protect you. There's laws that protect people who are using drugs. We want people to be alive and not have any type of thing happen. Okay, so I will speed through this because we're running out of time. Sorry. So let me just tell you that all these posters are available for free for you to order off of our website on kingcounty.gov/overdose. In order to get naloxone through lacedandlethal.com, so you can get naloxone one of two ways. You can go to a local pharmacy. Most of them have standing orders where you can get it for yourself, pay cash to get it, or most insurance covers it. Third option, we provide it for free through the county, through the lacedandlethal.com. If you go to the naloxone page, you can order it for free to your house. The last thing I'll say is people using opioids over and over need help, right? And the most effective thing that you can do to get people help is to get them on medication. One of the things that I'll say is that when somebody stops using opioids for a long time, this is what happened with my brother. He had been using opioids. He stopped using for a long time. Your body goes through decreased tolerance. When you go through decreased tolerance, you're at a higher risk of overdose. Your body can't handle what they once thought they can handle. So there's extremely effective medications that can help decrease overdose risk by 50%. There's an amazing medication called buprenorphine, which many doctors' offices are able to prescribe. Some are, some aren't, but you can access it through these two different channels. Learn about treatment.org or Washington Recovery Helpline, or you can always get a hold of me and I can try to help you out. We at our public health clinics also offer it. So we want to make sure that medication is as available as possible. But all this information is available online. So I know I went a little bit.
You did great. That was awesome.
Apologies,
Thank you
but
so much, Brad.
You're welcome.
For questions, we had some that were emailed to me. And so one question was, what does fentanyl in everything mean?
Did I say that?
So yeah, just at the beginning, we were talking about that fentanyl was in multiple different things. And so I think that just maybe clarifying what that means for our parents that may be a little freaked out with that.
That's a really good point of clarification. And if I said that in my moment, my apologies. Almost across the board, the place where we're primarily seeing fentanyl is in these blue counterfeit pills that have an M on it and a 30, right? So that's these blue M30s. If you end up getting one of these from a pharmacy or a doctor, it's legit. It's okay. Take it and talk to your doctor. Take it, talk to your pharmacist. But if it comes from anywhere else, like if it's me and Liz talking and Liz is like, I got this from my doctor, there's still, not trusting the source, because that is not a risk to be taken. So fentanyl is not in everything. My apologies if I said that. Fentanyl is coming into our community currently in the form of these M30 pills.
Thank you for that. And I won't be giving you any M30s, I promise.
Appreciate it.
But I think the point here too is to make sure that kids know not to take anything that's not prescribed from the doctor. So obviously we know that kids are experimenting like we talked about, but those are the points of conversation that Brad was talking about before. So we did have a comment from a parent just to the point that you were talking about before, that it's very easy to get. But then once a student is hooked, then they can actually, the dealer can ask them to do other favors or things to get free pills, and then still steal or do other types of favors that we do not want to see our youth be doing. So just information for parents that this is highly addictive, and that we just want to be talking to our kids about what's going on here. Let's see. And then a question from a parent: what does daily use look like before the overdose happens?
Yeah, I mean, it could look like a daily use of opioids. Opioids is a downer of a drug, right? It's a central nervous system depressant. So it, GR was talking earlier about lots of sleeping, right? Bags under the eyes, lethargy, problems staying awake, often nodding off. Those type of things are things that are pretty telltale signs of opioid use. Now, there might be other abnormalities that you might be seeing in your youth. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that your youth is using fentanyl, right? but this is why we want to encourage conversation. So, we know that a lot of youth have had struggles during COVID and just go through this a really difficult time period as in teenage transition years. So this is why we want to be able to encourage that conversation and set as much of a table where your youth feels comfortable talking to you in a truthful and honest manner. You're on mute, Liz.
Statement of the century. Thank you for that. Is it true that fentanyl can be in marijuana?
So I'm not saying that it can't be. I'm saying that like to date in our community, we haven't seen it.
Okay.
We'll say that one of the things, however you feel about marijuana legalization, all that type of stuff, is there's a high degree of quality control. And so if marijuana is coming from the marijuana store, there's a high degree of quality control end to end. Now, if somebody has marijuana and they intentionally sprinkle it with one of these fentanyl pills, that might be possible. I'm not saying that is beyond the realm of possibility, but we have not seen it. But like what we see is what happens in overdose deaths. So we haven't seen it as far as coming up in overdose deaths. I'm not saying it's not out there, but it is also something that's garnered a fair amount of fear. And I think more than anything, it's been primarily fear-based.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that clarification, because I think that's the worry that, oh gosh, what else is it in that we don't know? So thank you for that. One of the comments that Police Chief Nessel made said, can you pass on to all viewers and ask that them to help spread the word that when police are called to assist with an overdose, we arrive with the sole intention of rendering aid and protecting one's life. All too often, victims or their friends are afraid to call for help or delay the call because they think they're going to get arrested. Not true. Oftentimes, police can respond and arrive at an overdose scene faster than the fire department. Medics can, especially on busy nights when they're taxed. So most, if not all, police now carry Narcan and can literally save a life with an overdose victim. So kind of to your point, what you were talking about before, but right from the police chief's mouth, the Good Samaritan law protects you, and we just want to make sure that people are okay.
And it's such a great honor and privilege to work in a community where the police feel that know that that's part of, what they're doing to make the community a safer place, is wanting to protect our loved ones. And, we also know that when people develop substance use habits, substance use disorders, it's a diagnosable medical condition, and there is treatment available and there is help, available. And so people should feel that they can reach out.
Thank you so much, Brad, for taking your time during this evening and just being here with our community. I saw lots of folks on here that that I'm so glad are seeing this information, and that we're a community and we're here to help our kids and help our parents and families. We're going to send out a email to all folks that have registered with resources, a one-page resource that is kind of all the stuff in one page that all the schools have as well, and then other follow-up information that you've heard in the webinar tonight. So it is 7:30. I like to honor our time. Thank you so much, Brad. Any last words before we send everybody off?
Yeah, my last word is just a big thank you to GR.
Yes.
Liz, to Stephanie, thank you to you. But a big thank you to GR. I mean, without the courage to tell people's stories, I wear it as an honor and a privilege to talk about my brother and honor my brother's life every time. Without brave parents like GR talking about what his family is experiencing and the hope and being able to spread that so that other families don't go through it, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So a big thank you.
Thank you so much. And bravery is how we're going to save our kids. So thank you, GR, and thank you to Michelle for being willing to speak tonight.
Thanks for setting this up, Liz and Stephanie and Brad. Great job. Thank you so much for this. I learned a lot already tonight too, but thank you guys for doing this.
Thank you.
All right, this will be recorded. I'll have it up on the Tahoma Wellness YouTube channel, potentially tomorrow. So have a wonderful night. Stay safe and let us know any resources or things that you need following up. Have a great night.
Thank you, everybody.